Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. Today, we are going to be discussing how we made our escape room at ISE and then at Infocom. My name is Steve McCary. I will be your host for today, and I am joined by the brains behind this operation, our venerable training director for Q-SYS, Nate McCarrick. Good morning, Nate.
Good morning, Steve. I'm glad to be here and to be hosted by the one man in the world brave enough to have a Force Awakens poster displayed behind them on a public webinar.
Yeah, well, it's actually a puzzle.
Is it?
Yeah, I did it as a puzzle and
Nice.
framed it. So, my bravery knows no bounds. All right, so let's get to this, shall we? Beautiful. Everyone should be allowed to see this now. Nate, you see my
I
stuff?
do see it.
Wonderful. All right, well, let's get down to it. So let's first off, we're going to just show a quick video, which I hope will include the audio, but it
We could dub it over if it
I'm
doesn't.
sure we could.
Yeah.
Boy, this is being grumpy today. Why is everything being grumpy? Okay, well, we'll skip the video. It's live TV, folks. All right, so we are going to go through a couple of different things today. First thing we're going to talk about is just the concept of what is an escape room. So that way you guys can know a little bit about what we're talking about if you're not super familiar with the concept. Then we're going to talk about the functionality, what we actually did, and then lastly we will talk about the how we actually did it. So, Nate, if you would please walk us through the idea of what is an escape room.
Well, yeah, if you've never done an escape room, you probably should, because if you're on this call, you're probably a geek like we are, and you like puzzles and engineering things, and that escape rooms are custom made for us. There's escape rooms they kind of really became popular around maybe 10 years ago and have been doing well since, and they vary wildly in production quality. But the essential idea is that it's a small business where it could be something as small as like a little office room in an otherwise large office space, or it could be a large facility that hosts many escape rooms within it. And it's a game that you do with either yourself or usually up to about 8 friends, and you are in a small room for about an hour usually, and you have that 1 hour to solve a bunch of puzzles that are hidden within clues within the room, and you've got to use the hints you find to escape the room. And they can be themed in various different ways. Some are horror based, some are fun, carnival based, whatever. And they're really just kind of fun, for people who like puzzles, both to do and to build them, because there's just a lot of creativity that goes into them and ways that you can create things that people haven't done before. And it's a fun experience. I enjoy doing them. Whenever I travel, I try to find a new escape room.
So let's
Um,
talk about how you came up with this one.
Yeah, because actually there was one escape room here in California that I did, and then after I did it, the game master. There's usually a game master who watches you from another room and will help you give they'll chime in and give you hints, or maybe they're a character and they'll be interactive. I did one once, and afterwards I came out and the person was like, "Hey, you're the Q-SYS guy," and I was like, "What?" And then me and Patrick ended up going back to that escape room, and kind of doing a case study with them. But they recognized me because they were using Q-SYS in that room to automate and do control and do video and things like that. And so we chatted with them. And for a number of years, I had always kind of said to Patrick when we were talking about doing trade shows, I was like, wouldn't it be cool if we just did like a little escape room in our trade show booth, like at ISE and at Infocom? And we could, it could be a smaller, kind of tighter experience, and you use your knowledge of Q-SYS to figure out how to escape the room. And I think I'd said that enough times, and then someone else also said it to him, and then he took it seriously. And so he let me kind of have at it. And the idea was that, okay, we're going to make it's nice because it's a very small footprint. It doesn't have to be much larger than like a 10 by 10 space. And the idea was, okay, well, I want something in there that is, very digital based. Obviously, Q-SYS is all about network control and video and audio. So a lot of the things are going to necessarily be on touch panels. So we'll control things in the room via touch panels, but I also want something very physical. I enjoy escape rooms where there is some sort of physical puzzle to interact with. So I knew we wanted some big physical thing and a bunch of Q-SYS controlled things. And then we just started steamrolling with ideas of what these things could be that could happen in a short amount of time. And that's the first napkin sketch, which I have on my desk right here, as a matter of fact. Um, and then I just kind of pitched it to Patrick, and he was like, "Yeah, let's do this," and
You know,
kept on going.
talking about physical puzzles, for anybody that knows James Martin and Jasper Morrell out of our London office, the three of us have done a handful of escape rooms together. And we were doing one of them. I believe it was the one that's right by the office in Costa Mesa.
Uh-huh.
And there is a really interesting puzzle where you essentially have to run a labyrinth with ropes and pulleys because it is mounted to the ceiling, and it requires one person on one pulley running one axis, one running the other axis, and one person standing in the middle watching the ball, telling you which way to go.
I think I know which one you're talking about. It was a pirate one, right?
Yes, the
And
pirate
I
ship
think
where
that was
you're.
it. Intrepid Escape Rooms. I think that was.
Yeah,
That's a
that
good
that
room.
one that one I thought that was a great element to it. I was like, that's fun. We had a good time doing that one. But let's talk about how this one, specifically came to be. Once you got the approval, how did you actually make an escape room in a trade show booth?
One of the benefits of building an escape room in reality is that you generally have probably as much time as you financially can consider feasible to test and build that room, right? You've got your space, you build it out, and then you build it and you test it, you build it and you test it, and once it's ready, you open it up to the public. We don't have that when we do it in a trade show. Not at all. If we are very lucky, we have about maybe 3.5 days of build time before the trade show opens to the public. And that depends on whether or not everything else goes smoothly with our booth builders putting up walls and things like that, because there's just not a lot of time. So with a very short amount of time on the floor, that meant that everything had to be tested and validated beforehand, which is not unusual for what we do for trade shows. We typically, we'll do a pre-build of our trade show, here either in the office or in one of our warehouses, something like that. And where we build as much of it as we can, we test for functionality, and then we ship it off and go to the trade show and reassemble it. That was a little bit more tricky with something like this that had so many moving parts, because there was there's just a lot of variables in there of what could or could not work, and things that have to be aimed in the right direction, or lighting and all kinds of things. So it was a beast. It was probably the biggest thing that I think we've really done at a trade show, even though in my mind it seemed like it was going to be pretty small and accomplishable. But that did mean that I had, here both in my cube, but outside my cube, I had all this complicated, weird looking gear for a while. And people would come by and I'd say, "Hey, can you test something for me? Here's a bunch of wires. Can you try to solve this puzzle? You have 3 minutes." Go, which is a little
Yeah, I
ridiculous.
I remember being up there working on the experience center and walking through, and you guys were there, and there were many times where it was like, come stand right here and look at this
Uh-huh.
thing and then tell me what happens. And I
Yeah,
had
we were
I had no context. It was just like, okay, I can stand here. And then you would be like, and then grumble something under your breath, and I was dismissed. And to try again later, whatever it was.
it is hard to test a room that requires people to do it blind, without knowing what they're doing ahead of time, when it's just me, and I don't, and I know what it's supposed to do.
All right, so this is a little bit about what made ours unique. Um, obviously, we had to work within some constraints, right? So let's go over a few of those
Yeah,
because there were many.
Very much so. Again, I mentioned that a typical escape room lasts about 60 minutes, and that would not have been reasonable here in a trade show because the trade show is only running 3, maybe 4 days, depending on which one it is. And if you're running an experience that runs an hour long, that means you've got a maximum of what, 24 or 32 groups that can go through during the entire time. And we limited the number of people in there to 6, which was, we could have gone maybe 7 or 8 if we really needed to, but 6 was a comfortable number. So that's not a lot of people if we were doing a 1 hour experience. So we knew we wanted more people to come through. We also didn't want to take an hour of people's lives away from their trade shows because they're there for lots of reasons. So we decided that the actual room itself should last 10 minutes, which doesn't sound like a lot of time, but actually it felt like a good chunk when you were in there. Like you did accomplish a whole lot in 10 minutes.
It was
Um,
action packed.
yeah, there was a lot to do in that 10 minutes. And, plus getting in and coming out, it was about 15 minutes total of someone's life, which meant that we could do 4 groups in an hour, which meant, 4 times the number of hours that the trade show runs per day. And then we also said to ourselves, well, you know what? If we're going to build this once, why not build it twice? And so we had 2 of them that were identical back to back, so that they could be running concurrently, so that if someone's in line, they're always probably about a 5-minute wait for the next one to be open, which then obviously doubled the amount of people we could get through. And those escape rooms ran at capacity the entire time, nonstop.
Mhm.
And even still, we were only able to get a small percentage of the booth visitors to actually get through this as well, because we had a much higher number than that going through our tours. So it was a little bit of fear of missing out, FOMO going on here, because not everyone got to do it. We did our best to increase the capacity as high as we could, but I think we may be bringing it back to our next trade show just because more people wanted to do it. Asterisk on that. Not sure for not I don't know for sure if that's happening yet or not, but
Well, let's I mean, so even within us doing it, and I had the privilege of being able to work with you on a fair amount of this. Um, it even evolved from its, let's call it version 1.0 that we rolled out in Barcelona at ISE to what it became at Infocom, where it was actually a much more polished and it was a much tighter timeline and turnaround because there was a lot of, when we were in Barcelona, there was a lot of making it up as we went along.
yep.
Um,
Which is
not the
another
not the least of which was the Game Master station.
yeah.
So Game Master version 1 was rough, is being generous,
Yep.
in that there was literally one person trying to manage 2 rooms of people who were, in all likelihood, potentially speaking other languages,
That's true.
languages other than English.
Yeah.
So we definitely revisited the game master concept. I mean, part of it we revisited while we were there. There were things like adding sound bars and adding, touch controllers and things like that that we did literally on the fly as we were building it. But the polished end result of the Game Master station, I thought was one of the really cool parts about showcasing the flexibility of Q-SYS and how we can do things in real time. And I mean, because you can quite literally modify the experience on the fly while people are in. We had headsets where we could talk to them, we could hear them in the rooms. And not only that, if they were struggling with a particular thing, we could actually kind of help them. We could nudge them a little bit, maybe change some of the parameters, move the goalposts a little bit, as we saw fit. So, can you talk about that picture in the bottom left of the
Well,
deck
I
there?
mean, clearly I'm rocking some killer aviators that I bought the day before at
Mhm.
the theme park because I had gotten sunscreen in my eyes, and then I decided to own those aviators. Anyways, yes, that was our little closets in Florida where we were game mastering. And yeah, as you mentioned, part of every programming experience is an iterative process, right? Where you do it once and then you say, okay, how can I make it better up to the next version? And we had, the downfall of doing it live at a trade show is that you don't really get to learn a lot until it is running for the first time at max capacity with lots of people there. We didn't get to have any soft run really anywhere. So yeah, we were learning things on the fly that first time that we adapted to the second time. One of which, as you mentioned, was that I thought that the game mastering would be an easier job because we had because the experiences were very short, and we had built in a hint system into both of the rooms so that someone could, hey, I have a question, hit a button, it'll pop up with a hint based on your progress in the room and what you have not accomplished to tell you a suggestion of what you should do. We found that people just didn't use that. Instead, people just wanted to ask us questions over the mics because we had made it clear that we would be watching them. So Game Master watching two rooms simultaneously, trying to answer over here and trying to answer over there was very difficult. So yeah, we adapted that on the fly, and then the second time around, we had one Game Master dedicated per room, so you could really watch your group's progress. But that meant several things. That meant that you're watching them via cameras that are in the room, so you can literally see what they're doing. You can interact with them by using, by using Q-SYS to, to inject your own voice into the room and interrupt what's happening. We have on that little green panel you can see on there has all kinds of data on what they're doing, what they've accomplished in the room, what the current codes are, what the things they have, and including overrides, so that you can say, okay, this group is struggling too much. I'm going to hit this button to get them past this part, or I'm going to dial down the difficulty level on this particular puzzle and make sure that they can finish it in time. Because part of the game is we also want people to succeed, right? We don't want people to walk away feeling like, oh, I'm terrible. So we did a little bit of nudging and helping to make sure everyone was having fun, and that meant interacting with users in real time from the behind the scenes.
Okay, so let's sort of Tarantino this now that we have kind of seen the the end. We've talked about the end game. Let's talk about what it took to build these rooms physically. So we showed up. We had essentially four what looked like stainless steel boxes. I always thought they looked like a meat locker.
They felt like it too in
That is
Barcelona.
true.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, we walked in and this is pretty much what it looked like. And then as we began to work our way through our build, as we started, moving all of the parts and pieces in, and then, that now it's starting to look complete and we're starting to get things up and running. And this was clearly taken in Barcelona because no
By
one
the
was
amount of
wearing jackets and beanies in Orlando, whereas it felt like you could literally hang meat in those things when we were building in Barcelona. And then, I guess last but not least, is the finished product. So that's what we ended up with. We had some, old gear that, talk about the clutter for just a second.
Yeah, one of the key things that usually in escape rooms is the amount of data to process and figuring out what is valuable and what isn't. There's lots and lots of red herrings in escape rooms where you have to figure out, hey, is this useful or is this just set decoration? And that's part of that is just it's because it's an immersive experience. You want to feel like you're actually in some sort of environment. This is supposed to be some sort of scientist's laboratory, so there's a lot of visual clutter to distract you as well as to engage you, right? So that you can look around and read diagrams and figure out if that's part of the puzzle or not. Because if you only had the elements that were necessary to solve the puzzle, then you'd be able to identify those very quickly. But and this still wasn't even final version. Like we ended up covering this with there were like 1,000 sticky pads all over the walls that had clues on them or not. And that was all designed, so that you walk in. The first thing you do is you look around, you start absorbing and try to figure out what do I need to interact with in this room.
I'm of the opinion that a good escape room should absolutely give you sensory overload when you walk in.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. If it's
Like
too bare, then you're like, okay, I know what I got to do, and there it is. That's the thing.
all right. So let's talk about functionally how this thing worked. So let's go through the phases of the escape room. All right. So
Yeah. So The experience for our people started with an onboarding video. So they would be outside the experience and they would watch a short 1 minute video. They just explain to them, if they don't know what an escape room is, the very basics of what it is they're going to do inside. And we did this with headphones because we're in the middle of a trade show, so it's hard to hear. So we put them on, have them listen to headphones while that video was running, because part of our our job was to maximize our time. While that video was running, the game master would go into the room and reset all of the things that they needed to reset from the previous group. So they knew they had about 60 seconds to unplug things, put things back where they needed to start at the starting position, check the room, make sure that nothing is weird, clean up trash, walk outside, and then the group is finishing their onboarding video, at which point the game master would bring them inside, give them like maybe one or two last bits of advice, and hit the start button. And in ours, the first task that they had to accomplish was simply to make a connection. There was a dangling network cable that they had to connect in the right place. And there were clues in the room, as well as like a video that was trying to get them to understand that this was the first task, which was sometimes a very difficult thing for them to realize, especially in Barcelona when there was sometimes a language barrier. When you've got me and Patrick screaming things like "plug the cable in," but it's in a different language, then that's a problem. So after that was accomplished, then they had essentially two major tasks that they had to accomplish in the room, and those could be accomplished in any order, and preferably they could be approached at the same time. If the group split up and worked on them both at the same time, that was usually the best way people were most likely to succeed. Task one was they had to figure out the name of the network in the room. And they had to do that by finding it in the room, using the cameras in the room, using the Q-SYS cameras and steering them around. But there were a number of obstacles along the way that would occur if they tried to do it too quickly. And then they also had to figure out the password for the network. And they figured out the password via this big giant contraption on the wall. You may have seen it on the last slides. It was this big silver box that had these blue LEDs in it, and that was sort of designed to be like it was a bunch of analog wires, and you had to figure out which order to connect the analog wires in, again based on clues that you would find in the room. And you could accomplish these two tasks, in concurrently. And then once you had the network ID and the password, then you had the information you needed to log into the system, where you could then kind of take over the Mad Engineer's station and figure out what the code would be to successfully escape the room. And there's a keypad in the back door that if you could put in the right code, you would escape the room. So, really only 4 tasks totally to accomplish in those 10 minutes. But there were a lot of subtasks within those tasks. So I think we had about maybe 2/3 of an escape rate, which meant that it was challenging but not impossible. And most people did pretty good.
So now that we have covered sort of how we got there from a conceptual standpoint, let's start to dig into how we did this. Now, one of the reasons that we decided to even build this webinar is because it's cool, and Nate and I will sit around and talk about the escape room ad nauseum if you allow us to. But secondly, we wanted to show off the fact that every bit of the logic that is done to coordinate all of this data information is all done either with just straight up logic pins or a block controller. There is no Lua involved in here. So we wanted to highlight 3 different principles that we used in programming here. We have given these sort of a simple and intermediate and advanced concepts as it related to what it took to put this together. So first, let's talk about one of the simpler things to deal with, which is the wheel game and the introduction, cable connection bit.
Yeah. So like you said, we had a variety of difficulties in programming challenges, right? And one of them, this first one we talked about, was the idea that we wanted, especially for there to be some sort of narrative in this room, we wanted there to be, the first step was, okay, you need to connect to the system. We have a network cable, you need to connect your system to the engineer's system. And in order for that to accomplish, we said, okay, well, we want to plug in a cat cable into the wall, but how do we validate that that occurred? And there were a number of routes that we went down. Like if you're actually connecting a Q-SYS device, then any Q-SYS device is going to take a little bit of time to initialize, and that wouldn't have provided us with like the immediate feedback that we wanted that you've done the right thing. So we said, okay, well, that wasn't going to work. Maybe we're connecting two switches together and we're streaming audio from one switch to another switch. And once you get a positive signal presence on this streaming channel component, maybe that is the way that we could validate that the thing has been accomplished. And we kind of talked for a while about the best way to accomplish this. And then at the end of the day, we went with a surprisingly low-tech answer, which was that we just used GPIO and we stripped the network cable down to its bare wires and just used one single GPIO connection, so that on the cat wall plates, it's network to network, but both on the opposite sides, we're just stripping copper and taking it into GPIO. So we've got a permanent positive outputs coming out of one GPIO or one GPO, and then that's coming in on a GPI on the same core. Like you can see the two components there. We've got that always on and always to. Those are just a toggle button that is set to on and is never going to be toggled off. That's sending out a Boolean true. And once it comes back into the core via the GPI1 and GPI2, then we've got a connection, and we'll use that as our validator that they have accomplished the task. So that was a very nice, simple way to fake something on the back end.
All right.
Oh, and then actually, let me. You're talking about also the wheel game. Let me share my screen if I can,
Yep,
because I'll talk about that wheel game.
down south of this.
Where do I share on here? I feel like I'm missing one button. Share screen. There she is. I want to share this guy. So the wheel game itself was actually running on a separate core, which didn't need to occur. But I enlisted a buddy of mine to help build that thing, who had a lot of experience with building props, and I knew that I wouldn't have as much time to do everything as I needed to, because everything that we do in support of trade shows is in addition to our normal job requirements. It's absolutely icing, and we put aside our normal jobs for a while in order to do these. So when I was sending my first file to my buddy Sean to help build that wheel section, this was what I threw together for him, because he didn't really know Q-SYS. I said, I'm asking someone who doesn't really understand Q-SYS to build all the analog stuff. And I said, okay, here's what's going to look like. I'm going to have, GPIO, and here's what the input's going to look like. I'm going to use essentially a noise generator that's always producing noise on my analog output. And I'm going to be using a signal presence device to listen for audio that's coming in on this connection. I'm using various HDMIs, and we are just outputting to see if there is a valid connection that has been present there. Is there literally a HDMI cable connected? And if we do, we get a Boolean on that. When we get one coming in, do we have a connection coming in? So this was, the analog connection was, you had a bunch of HDMI cables and USB cables and audio cables and network cables, and you just had to make sure everything was connected. And essentially, this is the same idea as what we just did with the GPIO on the core, where we're sending presence out of all of those outputs. And if we receive them coming in on the inputs, then we say, hey, we've got a detection. That's true. And so then over on the logic side, we fed all that into my block controller and then scripted things to occur. So again, very low analog solutions for those kinds of level of puzzles was the right way to go, because it was really easy to confirm whether or not a task has been accomplished or not.
Yeah, so that was your low impact version.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your medium impact, which would be the body count game.
Oh, sure. Okay, so Well, let's explain what that is really quickly. So there was a section of one of the tasks where we kind of took over the room and we said, okay, the man engineer is on to you. He's trying to stop your progress. And the only way to fix this is that you've got to recalibrate the Vision Suite cameras in the room. And essentially what Vision Suite was going to then do, it was going to track the number of humans that it saw in frame, and you had to make sure that the number of humans in frame matched the number that it was requesting to see. So it would say, I want to see 2 humans. And then you've got a group of 6 people. So you're going to have 2 people run into frame and the other 4 people hide. And then it would repeat this task 4 or 5 times. So the people are running back and forth, diving into frame, diving out of frame. The time frame gets shorter and shorter as it goes until you have succeeded that task X number of times. And so that was actually the first thing that I built. So let me share again and bring that on over.
Let's talk about the humorous places people tried to hide from the camera.
I really enjoyed when people would like grab the lab coats props and put them over their heads and hope that Vision Suite would no longer recognize them as a human because they had lab coats on their heads. I will say, by the way, as I filter through this whole design, that when we build shows for escape rooms, or I'm sorry, when we build designs for trade shows, we usually know that they're only going to last for 3 days. So we generally don't build the cleanest designs ever. So if you're looking at my rat's nests and you're thinking, wow, the Q-SYS guys are so messy, it's because I never thought I would have to show this on a webinar. I thought I was just building it for myself, and that's it. But I want the body count game. Okay, so here's all just the logic for the body count game. On this side, it doesn't look like much. I've got the same system twice, one for room 1 and one for room 2. I've got a couple of external controls I've given myself, which allow me to tailor the experience so I can choose in real time how many faces I need to see, how many rounds need to go. If I see that people are having a difficult time, I could lower this so they only need to happen twice. I could say, hey, if these guys are really good, let's increase the difficulty, and they need to accomplish this 9 times in a row. And that's all occurring inside this block controller. And essentially, the scripting in here is not that long. It's, this only took me probably about 20 minutes to build the first time through, and then I tailored it. But essentially, I'm just running a timer that says, okay, here's the length of 1 round, and at the end of the round, we're going to run a function that evaluates whether or not they've succeeded or not. And then in that succeeding function, we're saying, hey, if the number of bodies that they are seeing on screen equals what we wanted them to see, then we're going to run a success function. If it's not, we're going to run a failure function. And we define those functions down here. If it's successful, then I'm going to show something on the UCI that indicates that they've succeeded. I'm going to then hide that information half a second later. I'm going to iterate 1 to their success count. I'm going to increase the pitch shift of the sound effect in the room so it gets heightened. I'm going to shorten the next round by a certain amount of time. I'm going to set the number of LEDs that they're showing that have been successful to 1 higher. And then if they have completely succeeded in the number of rounds, then I'm going to stop the game and I'm going to activate the end of the game. And if not, then I'm going to reset the whole thing and they're going to go back to 0. So the way to approach this, if you're familiar with block controller, is you can do this with any sort of game you want to accomplish. Like challenge yourself to say, hey, I want to build out tic-tac-toe, and just start thinking that through. What does that mean to build tic-tac-toe? Okay, I need various entities that could be either a 0 state or an X state or a blank state. Okay, build those entities. Then say, okay, if player 1 clicks this, what happens? If player 2 clicks this, what happens? And you just start thinking your way through with basic flow control and see if you can do it. I think that's one of the most fun ways to learn the block controller, which is not surprising because the block controller is a tool that was based off of, teaching children how to learn code. And that often involves accomplishing little things with little games, like moving little characters around and judging when they should move, when they shouldn't. And it's a really fun way to test yourself and teach yourself how to do programming in a way that is always anticipating different conditions. Because that's the real goal with programming things like this, is making sure you are not just solving the problem you want to solve, but making sure you are figuring out the ways that that problem could go wrong and solving for those edge cases as well. Making sure if they do this when they're not supposed to, how have I anticipated for that, and making sure that that is not going to occur. So this was the first thing that I built when I wanted to find out if this was even feasible. And honestly, the programming did not change very much from the first iteration to the last iteration, because it's just a matter of solving, hey, if they do this, do X. If they do something else, do Y. And it was pretty fun. And then it was just a matter of testing it out and making sure that it worked and was possible, and that the time frame was reasonable, and that people could figure it out and intuit what it was we were actually asking of them.
And there was also a devious little trick built into the buddy count game.
Yes, indeed. Yes.
That we could turn on and off, whereby we could ask for the number of desired humans could be the number of people in the group plus 2.
Correct. And I'm trying to remember which version of my file I'm looking at, and if I had that in here. Yes. So I've got this thing called easy mode. And easy mode is an LED that we could engage. Again, as the game masters, we had the option to say, okay, this group is really struggling. Let me make it a little bit easier for them. And in easy mode, let me scroll down and find where that comes in. We were, here it is. So whenever they accomplished their first task, and then it changed the number of humans that they had to see on the next time, I would get a random number based on a range from 0 to the number of players in the room. So when they first entered the room, we were collecting the data of how many players were in there. Could have been 1 person, could have been 6 people, whatever. So I definitely didn't want to make it so that you had to see 6 humans on screen if there was only 1 person in there. But I made that range equal to the number of humans in the room plus our bonus number. And by default, that bonus number was 2, which meant that there could have been a scenario where there's 6 of you in the room, but we asked for 8 humans. And this devious thing that we're talking about was that there was if you were thinking about the way the room worked, me and Patrick, there was a video that played on the back wall where we would show up and we would give you hints and clues. And you had the option to press a button and we would show up and give you a clue on what you were currently struggling with. So if there were 6 of you in the room and the cameras wanted 8 people, you could slam that button. Patrick and Nate would show up on the screen behind you, and the Vision Suite would qualify that as a human that would count towards your goal. And some people figured that out, some people did not figure that out. And so if we saw people struggling, we would hit the easy button, which would change the bonus number from 2 to 0, so that it would truly only allow the number of people in the room to be a qualifying number for their goal. And if it was on hard mode, then that changed back to 2 again. So it was things like that we learned from the first round in ISC that we adapted for Infocom in Florida to say, okay, we saw people struggling, let's see if we can add some controls like that to dial it down.
All right, so if that is your moderate difficulty, let's talk about the hardest thing to program in and then ultimately display, which is the scoreboard.
Yeah, this was not what you would think would be the hardest thing in the room, but by far the most complicated element was this guy here, which was on the front of the building. We had the leaderboard running for all the groups, and this was cycling through all of the scores for everyone. And they put their team name in and provides and we grouped it based on their group size. So we had one scoreboard for solo teams, and I think we only had clearly 1 person that did that. We generally didn't let people go solo. This is the scoreboard for people with 2 people in their group, and this scrolls on and on. And if you were there, hey, maybe you'll see your team name, because this is still the data from the last day. Now, this was something that probably would have been easier if I had gone with Lua scripting, admittedly, because this requires a whole lot of tables. But it's 1000% accomplishable in block controller. And I'd been working on the intermediate version of our Control and UCI series class at the time, and so I was really deeply steeped in block controller, and I kind of wanted to challenge myself and say, hey, can I do this with blocks? I think that I can. I'm pretty sure I can, and I want to dive into it to figure out if I could. So this meant that it meant that we were collecting lots of data. So when people entered the experience, we had to decide, okay, which room are you in? I'm in room 1, and then we would say, okay, how many people are in your group? A lot of cool UCI things going on here, blocking, disabling the buttons when they're at the top and the bottom of the range. Say, okay, there's 6 of them. They can choose between English and Spanish. Here, this was just loading up a different CSS. So whatever you pick, all of the content on this UCI was being delivered via CSS. So all of the buttons change in real time when you have a new language. That was kind of something fun we added for Florida that we should have done in ISC when there were more languages we probably should have anticipated. And then they're putting in their team name, and they could either enter their own team name, or most people didn't have one on the fly. So we have a random name generator that would pull from several banks of prefixes and suffixes to really get one of like 800 possible random names that we would provide people. Okay, so we're storing all that data. And now I am keeping track of that data in room 1 and in room 2. So in room 1, we're collecting, what their team name was, how many people were in there, as well as, their language preference coming in right down here. That would have to filter forward to all of the video files that were in the room. But we then had to remember that data when it came back and they succeeded. So once they finished the room, that would trigger back to my first page. Where's my schematic for this room? That would come back to our leaderboard information. So it would come in and say, okay, room 1 had this, that was their name, this was their score that we now have information for by the end of the path. And that needs to get fed into the right place in all of these different leaderboard options. So that meant a whole lot of work with arrays.
So just for a quick moment of context, the
Yep,
score, this is like golf, lowest score wins. Everybody
correct.
starts with a score of 2000, and the longer your time goes and the more hints you use reduces can either increase or change your score, but the point here is that you want to have the lowest score.
Yeah, the score the score was based on you got 1 point per second that you used. So we did have something. So even though the counter in the room was counting down from 10 minutes, we had a timer that was counting up, right? 1 second equals 1 point, 2 seconds 2 points. So the faster you do it, the fewer points you have. And then you were also penalized by doing certain tasks. Like if you input a code wrong, it would add 10 points. Or actually, it would add a variable number of points based on how many we chose to have the penalization count for. Add that to your score. So if you took the whole 10 minutes, then that's 600 points right there. That's why you're not seeing many people with scores of higher than 600, but you could have gotten more than a score of 600 if you were also penalized for things too. But lower scores in the low 400s or lower than that were people who succeeded pretty well. So yeah, so here I've got tons of arrays. I've got arrays. I need arrays for everything just based on whether it's room 1 or room 2. And I wanted the possibility that maybe in the future we needed to have a third room. If we were going to do a third room, then doing everything in arrays makes it really easy to just increase my array count from 2 to 3, and all this logic would have still worked exactly the same, which is very nice. And then all of my leaderboards are arrays, and essentially this one was a much more complicated script because I've got to do lots of things. I've got to take all this data and combine it. I wasn't able to do what I could have done in scripting as easily. In scripting, in pure Lua, when you create an array, essentially you can say, hey, I want item number X in this array to have value Y. And that would have been really easy for these scores because you could say, hey, I want item number 600 to be Spider-Man and MJ is the name of that team. In block controller, it's not quite that friendly because in an array in block controller, all of the items in the array are necessarily an increasing integer by 1. So you've got item 1 is number one, number two, number three, number four. You can't just decide that you've got something here, number one, number 200, number 600, because there's going to be lots of empty information in between them. So rather than creating my leaderboards with the key of their score and the value as their team name, I actually had to shove that together into creating one solid block of text, which was their score and team name associated with each other, concatenated into a single string. And that also meant that whenever I wanted to sort that data, I then had to peel out the first four characters of that information and then remember that as its own separate score, and then run a loop that would reorder them all. So it definitely got a little more complicated than it could have been if I had done it in scripting. But regardless, the point is I could do it in blocks, and it worked. And once it works, it works every single time. And there you can see there's a lot of things in here where I had to anticipate new things and said, okay, well, I need to make sure that I'm clearing the scoreboards. Make sure, what do I need to do if I have someone who has a score that's only 2 characters rather than 3 characters? I need to add the number of digits in that to make sure that it counts. So there was a lot of edge casing in this script, but hey, it is doable. You can really do a lot of things with block controller before you dive deep into Lua. I'm making this an advertisement for the Control and UCI series because
Hey, I mean, take a second and tell everybody about that because
oh,
it's totally worth
if
mentioning
you're
at
not
this point.
familiar, I mean, earlier this year we launched our Control and UCI series of the training series, which is 3 different courses that all cover essentially the same concept, which is you're building out a conference room. And the fundamentals version of the course accomplishes all of that using just control components, real simple connections, but it can't go super deep because control components eventually do have a limit of what they can accomplish. The intermediate version of the class accomplishes everything purely in block controller, and you can get a lot deeper and a lot more interaction, two-way communication. And then the third version of the class, the advanced class, does it all with Lua scripting. Same tasks, but different control programming methods. And all 3 of those classes, you can take the first 2/3 of the class purely online, watching videos, and then you follow that up with a live session with an instructor where you get to ask questions and bounce ideas and then do a couple more tasks with that instructor. So they are, especially the intermediate and the advanced classes, they're longer classes. They're 10, 14-hour classes, but we really do spend as much time as we can making sure that you understand the why of why you would use these tools to accomplish these tasks and what you can do with them that you would not be able to do with the previous rung down of programming. I think they're very, very valuable. And this is a good example of learning that block controller is more than just in out. You really can accomplish some quite complicated things with it as long as you learn the tools and learn how to make those tools work in your favor, rather than just treat them like like what you think they are. You can really get quite complicated, especially with arrays, in both blocks and Luas.
So we have a question here.
Yay! Let's
Is
do questions.
Are we planning on doing an intermediate second part of the course in the UK or online for the UK?
Oh, that is a great question. So James, who runs the training in our UK office, I know he does the intermediate and advanced classes live in their training center. There are some part 2 sessions that some of the instructors over there are doing. At the same time, if there aren't any, reach out to them, reach out to that side and say, hey, I'm interested in this. And if once they have enough interest, they may just open up some sessions, make sure they're meeting that demand. If not, you can sign up for the ones that are in a different time zone. It may be an uncomfortable time for you. I don't want you to stay up in the middle of the night. No one loves learning scripting when it's midnight, but I don't think there's any hard restrictions. We're not going to kick you out if you're not in the same time zone as when it's being taught. So it's only a single session, 4 to 5 hours. So if that works for you, come join us anywhere in the world.
All right. Any other questions for Nate or Me. I don't know why you would have a question for me, but
Please ask. If you don't ask questions, then there's no point in this being a live webinar. It could have just been a
yeah.
video,
So
a pre-recorded video.
the question that we generally get is, is this being recorded? Will we get assets? Yes, it's being recorded. You'll get a copy of that slide deck that we were going through, showing you kind of a little bit about what we do. There's also some screenshots in there um, of some of the stuff that Nate showed live, but you can go through that slide deck. You'll get a recording, so you can actually see the stuff that James has in there, or that Nate has in there. Sorry, somebody put a message up talking about James, and my brain can only handle one person at a time. Clearly, the same gentleman said he tried to sign up for Canada or the U.S., but he was advised it wasn't possible.
It wasn't possible. Send,
Interesting.
send me an email. I'll get you. I'll fix you up.
Yeah, he said he can message James, but yes, indeed, always reach out to us. Will you be doing a deep dive into the booth tour programming? Oh,
Ooh.
that one actually would be me.
Yeah.
Will you share the Q-SYS design? Sadly, no.
This
Um,
one not, and mostly because we are intending on doing it again. I don't want to give out the secrets of
yeah,
how to
there's
solve the puzzle.
spoiler alerts in there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you can just go back through with the screenshots that Nate gave. And if you want to build this, then you can do it yourself. We'll be doing a deep dive into the booth tour programming. Wow, that would require about a 5 hour webinar that I don't think anyone wants to sit through. But as always, you are welcome to if you have questions about how we do things in our booths, you are always welcome to reach out to like either your AET members. You can always email me. I generally work at a fairly high level on the booths. I did the Vision Suite room this year. Tyler Sturts, who's also on our strategic accounts team, he did the knock room this year. Um, so yeah, I
I mean,
mean,
you
we're
you could,
all here.
and there's to some degree you can a way to answer that question without sharing everything immediately is that every experience in the booth is generally its own system. Like we've got a dozen engineers, and each one handled their own thing, and that means that we're using a core in each room, sometimes multiple cores in each room, depending on
Mhm.
how those tasks are broken down, and then lots and lots of data sharing between those cores. So there's a lot of control connections and data connections that are making sure that those rooms tie together, that they feed information from one to the other, especially in this last one when we were collecting
Mhm.
user data in the first room that was being used in the fourth room. Now, that all could have been accomplished probably with a single, larger level core. But that would have meant that one person had to program that whole thing. So we do break our tasks down into digestible chunks per engineer, and then everyone programs their own section in their own ways, and then we just find the ways to make sure that we're sharing the data that we need to. And I did that with the escape rooms too. I kind of foolishly built both escape rooms running on a single core because it was easier for me to wrap my head around. Hey, I'm building one design and I'm going to do all this stuff. In the end, I probably would have actually chosen to use one core per room just to keep it all kind of segregated from each other because they didn't need to share that information aside from the data coming in from the users. But that, I mean, that's kind of like a quick insight as to the way we approach this is because we're building it with time and the sensitivity of time involved, it might not be built the same way that we would build it if we had the option to have one person control the entire thing from scratch.
And to that end, I will say, working on both the booths and the our experience centers, um, they are again similar yet different. Like the experience center has 4 areas. Each of those areas has a core, and then there is one core that sort of rules them all. That anything that needs to be shared between. We do tons of like notifications and sharing information between the cores and all of that kind of stuff. Um, are there in-person trainings in the U.S.? My God, of course there are.
Absolutely.
If I recall correctly, you can take beginner or fundamentals, whatever it's. I can't remember what their actual terminology is. That's online.
Yeah.
And then intermediate is either, but we offer that in person, either in Costa Mesa or in Austin. And then advanced, which is where you actually get into Lua. It's similar to the old Control 201, only better in many ways. Um, I can say that
Yeah.
because I helped write Control 201, so
That's right.
I'm allowed to bash it if I see so fit. Um, yeah, we do those in Austin and Costa Mesa. And if you have not seen one of our training centers, they are totally worth doing. If you go to Austin, it's a little bit of a smaller space, but you have the benefit of all the really good food in the Austin area.
Yeah, you do. The food we have at the Costa Mesa one is nothing compared to the barbecue you get in Austin.
But if you go to Costa Mesa, you get it's a bigger experience. You get to see things like our fireside chat room and our front row signature room and a bunch of our other demos that we have there. Plus, you're actually in the building, so you can walk around and run into people like Nate and Patrick in the
I mean,
hallways.
I'm literally
And
walking to the experience center the moment this is done because we got a class starting at 9 o'clock that I'm going to be assisting with. So,
so, yeah, I mean, two different experiences, and yet both of them are a ton of fun.
and
And
and and I'll say this: we tailor that way for a reason, and that depends on the way that you like to learn. The benefit of doing the version that has all the videos online first is that you can pause, you can go back, you can rewatch, you can really analyze the script and make sure that you've got it the right way, and you can take it at your own pace over weeks if you wanted to. And then you wrap it up with a 4 hour class with an instructor to finalize everything. That might be the way that you prefer to learn, but it means you can't ask questions along the way, right? Because you are interacting with a video. Whereas the live classes, you get to ask, you got a real instructor there the entire time from start to finish. So you can interrogate as much as you want. You can get those deeper answers, but you have a time constraint. You can't pause and you can't go back. So there's a pros and cons to both sides, and it
mhm,
really more depends on the way that you like to, the way you know your brain is going to work.
yeah, so that pretty much wraps up what we've got for today. It is 10:59 Central Time here, meaning it is 8:59. Nate had to get up early and come in here to hang out with us today, so we appreciate the time. As always, if you guys have any questions, we are always findable at firstname.lastname@qsc.com. It's not a super giant secret as to how you find people within the company. We are not hidden, trust me.
Which is good that you changed your name from QSC webinars. So otherwise they'd be
That
emailing
would have been fun.
qsc.webinars at
I could
qsc.com.
have done that and then just never gotten an email. Um, so yeah, always, reach out to us. We're always happy to help. Thank you guys so much for taking the time. We appreciate that. We know it's an investment. Even an hour out of somebody's day is can be a lot. A lot happens in an hour. So we definitely appreciate it. Like I said, like I covered earlier, you'll get in about a week or so, depending on how long it takes for marketing to patch everything or put everything together. Um, Package was the word I was looking for. You'll get a recording link and the deck, and that's all I got. So, Nate, any parting words?
um, come check out the classes. They're fun. They teach you good coding principles.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys again. We appreciate it. Have a great rest of your week, and thanks for using Q-SYS. Bye, everybody.
Bye.